The Post-Truth War on Truth by Dan D'Ancona provides a thorough exploration of how the rise of post-truth politics has eroded the role of truth in public discourse and undermined democratic processes. D'Ancona presents an urgent critique of the ways in which truth has become malleable, often sidelined in favor of emotionally charged narratives, personal beliefs, and ideological motivations. The book looks at the broader implications of this shift, from the erosion of trust in institutions to the rise of populism, and argues that society is engaged in a sort of war on truth, where objective facts and reason are increasingly dismissed as irrelevant. At the core of D'Ancona's argument is the idea that the post-truth era, where truth is less important than personal belief or emotional appeal, is not just a fleeting cultural trend but a profound shift that has deep consequences for politics, public trust, and democracy itself. The book explores the rise of post-truth politics, where facts are frequently dismissed in favor of narratives that align with specific worldviews, often constructed to evoke emotional responses rather than to present verifiable truths. This shift is particularly evident in the rise of populist movements and the strategies employed by political leaders who have mastered the art of manipulating facts to suit their political agendas. D'Ancona highlights how modern political figures, particularly populists, have exploited this new environment to rally support by disregarding facts, distorting reality, and creating alternative narratives that cater to people's emotions. These leaders often present themselves as champions of the common people, positioning themselves against the so-called elite or mainstream establishment, which is frequently portrayed as out of touch with the concerns of ordinary citizens. By positioning themselves as the antidote to the elitism of the political establishment, these leaders can rally widespread support, even as they promote policies based on misinformation or misrepresentation of facts. One of the most significant ways this manifests is through the role of social media. In the digital age, the spread of misinformation has accelerated, and social media platforms have become fertile ground for disinformation campaigns. The algorithms that drive platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube reward content that generates engagement, often prioritizing sensationalist, emotionally charged, and polarizing content over objective reporting or fact-based discussions. This creates echo chambers, where people are exposed primarily to content that reinforces their existing beliefs and where false or misleading information can spread unchecked. In this environment, the distinction between fact and fiction becomes increasingly blurred, and individuals find it more difficult to distinguish truth from lies. D'Ancona also explores the deeper cultural ramifications of the post-truth era. He argues that when truth becomes subjective and negotiable, it leads to a loss of shared reality. Society becomes fragmented, with different groups living in entirely different informational worlds, each clinging to their own set of truths. This fragmentation has serious consequences for how individuals engage with one another, how they understand the world, and how they make decisions. Public debate, once grounded in shared facts, becomes increasingly difficult when people no longer agree on what is true. This fragmentation creates a toxic environment where reasoned discourse is replaced by ideological battles, where the priority is not to find common ground but to prove that one's own narrative is the true one. The erosion of truth has also had a profound impact on the media. D'Ancona discusses how news outlets, in the race for profit and viewership, have increasingly embraced sensationalism and entertainment at the expense of careful, fact-based journalism. The rise of fake news and the widespread dissemination of unverified, often misleading information have further eroded public trust in the media. Instead of serving as objective sources of information, many media outlets have become highly polarized, with some catering to specific political or ideological camps, reinforcing existing biases rather than challenging them. A particularly insidious effect of the post-truth era is the way in which it has contributed to the erosion of trust in expert knowledge. D'Ancona explains how scientific and academic institutions have come under attack by populist leaders and their followers, who dismiss expert opinion as elitist or out of touch. This has led to a dangerous climate where expertise is no longer valued, and individuals are encouraged to rely on personal opinion or anecdotal evidence instead. In some cases, this has led to the widespread rejection of scientific consensus, whether on issues like climate change, vaccinations, or the COVID-19 pandemic, where established facts are ignored in favor of conspiracy theories or unfounded beliefs. The consequences of living in a post-truth world are far-reaching, d'Ancona argues. When truth becomes negotiable, it becomes increasingly difficult to have meaningful discussions about policy, social issues, or governance. Public debate becomes poisoned by misinformation and falsehoods, and individuals are left with a fractured sense of reality. This undermines the functioning of democratic systems, where informed decision-making is crucial. When people can no longer agree on basic facts, it becomes almost impossible to reach consensus on important issues, and democracy itself becomes endangered. Despite the bleak picture d'Ancona paints, he does not argue that the post-truth era is an irreversible or inevitable development. Instead, he calls for a concerted effort to defend truth and restore its role in public discourse. He advocates for a cultural shift that emphasizes the value of objective facts, evidence-based reasoning, and critical thinking. Education, media literacy, and a commitment to intellectual humility are key tools in combating misinformation and the rise of post-truth thinking. D'Ancona urges individuals to be more discerning consumers of information, to question the sources of what they read and hear, and to prioritize truth and reason over emotional appeal or ideological conformity. Moreover, d'Ancona stresses the importance of restoring trust in institutions, particularly in journalism, science, and academia, which have long been pillars of truth and rational discourse. He calls on these institutions to be more transparent, accountable, and proactive in defending the truth. This means not only combating misinformation but also ensuring that the public is presented with well-researched, fact-based reporting and analysis. For institutions to regain the trust of the public, they must commit to high standards of integrity, transparency, and openness to scrutiny. Ultimately, the post-truth war on truth serves as a wake-up call. It reminds us of the importance of truth in sustaining democracy, public trust, and social cohesion. D'Ancona's book underscores the need for a collective effort to defend truth, reason, and evidence, recognizing that these are essential to the health of society. While the post-truth era presents significant challenges, it also offers an opportunity to reassert the value of truth and restore its role in shaping our political, social, and cultural landscape. In the face of misinformation and manipulation, d'Ancona argues, we must work harder than ever to ensure that truth prevails in our public and private lives.